never know where life is going to take you. Some people know exactly where they want to be and go for it full throttle. Others just stumble upon it organically. And then there are those who just follow their intuition. This is a podcast about reaching your personal best through resilience, motivation, and passion. This is Marc My Words. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Marc My Words. I'm Mark Schmidt, and this is the podcast where we talk to entrepreneurs about their journey and career transition to entrepreneurship. And today, I have a guest who hails from the country of my all-time favorite band. They've literally been my favorite band since I can remember. I even have one of their albums up, which of course is ABBA. And I'm sure Lena hears plenty about ABBA being from Sweden, but I will not get into that too much, hopefully. Today, we're really going to get into what Lena Rekdal does, and we're going to talk about her journey from being a student here in the United States, then to the UK, and then to the founding of her global mobility and relocation company called Nimmersion. And I've got a little blurb here. So this is actually from a message that Lena sent me. And her company founded, and oh God, I'm like stumbling over my words. Let me try that again. So she's been a part of this entrepreneurial journey for 26 years. She founded a global mobility firm in Sweden, 1996, which is Nimmersion, and they welcome talent for work permits, compliance, practical assistance around housing, schools, and even enjoying life. And she has survived 3 major recessions and a pandemic. And after stumbling over some of those words, I welcome you, Lena, to Marc My Words. How you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm thrilled to be here, and it will be a really fun hour here together.
And I certainly hope so. So we will have some fun, and we're going to talk about your journey, which goes back a few years. And right off the bat, I want to ask about you coming to the States. And obviously, you seem to have like a real love for your home country, and I can't blame you for that. I've never been there, but it's very beautiful there. And you somehow decided to come to the States to study. What prompted that decision?
It actually started much earlier, and my father was, or he is Norwegian. And when he was young, he was actually recruited to MIT when he was 17. So he took the boat, Queen Elizabeth II, to Boston and studied at MIT. So he really had a great time during those years and always had this love for the US. He went back, he was quite nomadic in nature. So he lived in France, he lived in Paris, he lived in Vienna. He kept on traveling all through Europe for quite some time, but he was also well educated. So he started working, and at that time, it was pretty grim in Norway after the World War II. They hadn't really caught up yet. So most ambitious Norwegians would end up in Sweden. And that's where he met my mom. Or actually, they met in Austria skiing, but they lived here. And then we moved to Tunisia. I was born and we lived in Switzerland, and, kept moving. And when he had an opportunity to get a job in the US, he jumped on that. And it was one of those fantastic relocations. And I didn't know this would become my life afterwards. But we were so well taken care of. They moved over our horses, dogs. We had a private jet. They did everything for us. I mean, the welcome couldn't have been nicer. We also, the whole family got green cards. So it was really the red carpet. I went to Skidmore College, which is upstate New York. And I spent 4 years there and then moved to what we would say moved to the city. So that was New York, and lived on Manhattan and worked there and had just the most fantastic time. But after 7 years, I was ready to go back to Sweden and at least try it. So I had left Sweden as a teenager and I moved back as an adult. And then I sort of went back, sort of a little bit back towards the UK. So I got an MBA in London at Webster University, which is a US university in St. Louis. And they had a London campus. So that was really fun. So when I came back to Sweden, what happened, and I just told this story last night, and I don't really talk about this very often, but I went to the movies and I saw a movie that is really not my cup of tea, and it was called Stargate. It's like one of those, I don't know, Star Wars. It wasn't Star Wars, it was Stargate. And it was a huge theater. We were in the middle, in the very middle of the row, so I couldn't get out. And I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, I really wanted to do, become an entrepreneur, start my own company, do something that I really enjoyed. And I didn't know exactly what that would be. And then I was thinking to myself how Sweden was far less modern, that I would say, than in the US. I came from a really fast-paced New York City lifestyle to the old world. Things were slow, people were not open to new ideas. And I was thinking to myself how hard it was to not understand the society I lived in. So I called around to all the big corporations and I said, what do you do with your expats? And they said, we have a huge problem with our expats. We don't know how to support them. And I said, well, I'm thinking about writing a book for people that move to Sweden. And this book was called The Newcomer's Practical Handbook. And I brought in some lots of tips, explaining things, and one of the pieces was bringing in Anderson tax consultants, and they did a write-up on what expats should think about. And so I published 3 editions of this book. It was very popular. The last edition was 10,000 copies, and then Anderson Tax Consultants called me and said, hey, can you take care of our expats? And I was like, well, I wouldn't know how to do that. And they said, well, you wrote a book. You know more than anybody else. And I was like, all right, yeah, that's a good idea. Let me try. And that's how the whole global mobility started. So already from the very, very beginning, I did immigration. I started in my hallway. So I put a little desk in my hallway and I got a long, long cord, because this was in 1995, to my phone. And then I walked around in my tiny apartment and I started a company. And now 6 years later, it's grown, and I was extremely fortunate. It was tough times in the beginning. It's not easy to start a company, and there's a lot of things you learn along the way that I didn't know. But I had a good background. I had a good marketing education. So I came from the US, so I was very outgoing, and I was not afraid to ask people for things and open doors. I was far more outgoing than most Swedes would ever be. So that really was to my advantage. And yeah, so that's how it started.
Wow. So it wasn't like moving to a new country made you develop a passion for this industry you're in now. It was really just seeing a movie, writing a book, and the next thing you know, you have a company. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So,
moving from New York City, and as you can imagine, for moving anywhere from New York City will be a slower pace. And that definitely happened to me too. So I found it very, very frustrating for a long time. I didn't think, whenever you ask in Europe, say, well, this isn't really working. Can we do it another way? The answer is always no. And I'd be like, but there are better ways of doing this. So could we try? And the answer would again be absolutely no. So that was, it was quite frustrating. And it was a difficult move. And it was my language. I had friends here. I grew up here. I did know, lots of people. And that's why I thought, if this is tough for me, this must be extremely difficult for somebody who doesn't even have the language. So, and that's where it came from. I wanted to facilitate, to make it easier for other people, and also break the mold. And that's what I did. I came up with new solutions, new ways of doing things that was also better adapted to Americans. And Americans was my first big group of people, and I would say that by doing this job and writing that book, I turned every single stone in Stockholm, and that made me love my city that I had been a little hesitant about.
so how do you break the mold? How do you break tradition? That's kind of a big question, but for your experience, how did you get around that and maybe get a few more people to say yes than no?
Well, I think it's really finding the positive things. It's like a mind flip. And
Okay, I'm getting a message.
background noise.
Oh, background noise. Yeah, I've been hearing the background noise. That's okay. So you're gonna go close the door. Um, okay, so Lena's gonna go close the door here. You can go ahead, and I'm gonna keep talking. And so while I am watching her do that, you can. Oh, she came back so fast. I was gonna do a little bit of advertising, but Lena came right back. So yeah, I usually try to fill those gaps by talking about people's websites, but you came right back. So
It wasn't that far,
well,
but
it just
it
gives
was.
the show more character. So we're gonna pick.
Well, it's the work from home.
Understood.
It's Saturday, so they're preparing for dinner. They're quite loud.
Gotcha.
So, but anyway, yeah. So there's a notion, and I think it is a Dutch in origin. And I just recently heard of this, and I didn't know it existed. But I think this is what I did. It's the flip thinking. So what if this was easy? What if this could easily work? What is the benefit for you to help my client with something? So just to really twist things, or look at the positive things and the win-win situations. And that wasn't exactly the Swedish psyche. So, massaging that kind of attitude with other people was something I got good at.
Wow. So you basically, I mean, on top of starting an entrepreneurial company in a time when that wasn't really like a popular thing to do, you also had the challenge of actually changing attitudes. So, and of course, 26 years later, you are still standing and doing so well. And I'd be curious to know what has changed. I mean, obviously, technology has changed, and social media, the internet has put you on the map so much more. But what else has changed over that period of time?
Many things, just going from my hallway to having employees, having to manage a team, to manage an office. But I would say that the biggest difference is when I started, I wrote a book because it was paper and you printed things and you handed it to somebody. And from that perspective, we were an authority. You know, we had the truth. This is the truth, and I've written it down, and you can read about it here. And it took only a few years. We had one of the first websites in our industry. We're really on the forefront with many things. And for people who don't know, I'll just explain a little bit what a relocation and immigration company is doing. What we have done since day one is we help people get work permits. So we deal with authorities, immigration agencies, etc. And we make sure we take care of everything that happens outside the office. So the HR team will bring people in and get them a desk and a computer and, you know, introduce them to their teams and let them know what's expected. We take care of everything else. We make sure that they go to the local registrations, that they're signed up for medical services, that their kids go to school, that it's a warm welcome, and we become their best friends for that sort of first period they are in Sweden. And we get all the questions and the frustrations and the celebrations. It's a really, really fun job. You get very close to people in a short amount of time. And then, of course, the whole idea is that they should fly out on their own and you know, thrive. And our ambition is that it should be the happiest time in their lives. So when they leave Sweden, they will become ambassadors that go out in the world and tell other people what a great experience they had. So that's what a relocation company is doing. And then came the internet. So first we had, you know, a ton of information. The book basically went online, but so did a lot of other stuff. And as we all know, doing an internet search is now you get absolutely overwhelmed with information, and you have to be really good at evaluating the source. So I feel that after in the past probably 15 years, now it's we still have that website. It's behind password protected pages, and people who read it can trust that, well, these guys probably know what they do because they've been doing it for a long time. So we can trust that they are, you know what they're saying, and this should be correct. However, with the internet, there are so many, especially in the expat groups, and it's easy to misunderstand things. And, you know, there's a large nationality, and they have their own, with their school, their own guide that says you can't buy rubber boots and Wellingtons and raincoats after September. So that's the first thing you have to do when you move to Sweden. So when you tell them, oh, you know, you should go on a boat trip this weekend, and give them tips when they come in August and September, they're like, we can't. We have to go buy rubber boots because Sweden runs out of them. And I tell them it's a rainy country and it gets cold, and you can rest assured that you will be able to buy all these things also in September, October, and around the year, because it's just stuff that everybody needs. But so now we have to sort of take out misunderstandings out of the internet. So we're not authorities, we are clarifiers or facilitators more.
So let me see if I have myself understanding. So are you kind of like a third party that works with companies where people, like, you're notified, like, hey, so-and-so's coming to this country, they may need some help getting adjusted? Is that basically what your role is? Is that basically how it works?
Yes, I would say so. So let's say Coca-Cola, for instance, just because it's a brand name. Let's say they're bringing in 5 people or 10 people because they are actually setting up an IT project for a supply chain project. And they're bringing in, let's say, 5 or 10 software engineers from India to do so. One of them, as soon as they are signed on, they will call us and say, can you make sure they have work permits, and can you welcome them? And they also need a place to live. And then we say, well, and then we'll take the ball, we'll run with it. And we will liaise with the person that is moving, and we will report back to HR.
Wow, that's simple.
It is. I mean, I must say, I thought I invented the industry. So, but of course I didn't, because even though I just wrote a book, I thought I knew that the service was needed. I just didn't know I would be the one doing it, because I wanted to be bi-coastal like my parents, who split their time between the US in the winter and Europe in the summer. And you can't have a company and live in two continents. But I didn't know that there was an industry like this when I started doing this. But it turns out it does. And of course, it's American. So it's the US military that started this way back when, after World War II, when they were sending people, spies and observers around the globe. That's when the relocation industry was born. So it's actually, my company is about 26 years old, but the industry is about 20, 30 years older than that. So it's probably started in the 50s a little bit, but in the 60s. And there are huge military stations in Germany and in Iceland and all over the place that is American or NATO. And so just like the internet, it comes from the US Army.
Whenever I meet people like you, who it almost kind of sounds like one thing led to another and they stumbled into this really awesome career path, I'm just like, man, that is definitely not the way my life has worked. I feel like I've had to work so hard and have had to plan and think and like, what's my passion? What do I want to do? And all that stuff. And it just is so remarkable to me how easy it appears to be sometimes for some people. And one thing I do want to ask, if you weren't doing this, do you have any idea what you would have wound up doing?
Well, when I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I'll tell you, it takes many years to be an overnight success. So starting a company is very difficult. You make many mistakes. There are a lot of technicalities to running a company that you just don't know until you do it. It was also an industry that wasn't at all present in Sweden. It didn't exist. And we are the land of IKEA. We go to IKEA with a flat box and we put it together. There's no service here. There's no service, customer service. It's people. And this goes way back in history to the 19th or 17th century, when they split up all the land, because you would have the church in the middle, and then it would be little slots going out from the church, and people would walk around and walk over each other's plots of land, and they would all cooperate to make it, and share the plows and things like that. So it was very collaborative. And then they realized this is not an efficient way of handling the, agriculture. So they traded these slots and they became much, much bigger. And then they would only see each other once a week in church. And this resulted in less collaboration and also a lot of sayings like, no man is a strong man will handle his own thing. Alone is strong. And so that's really fostered Swedes. We think we have to manage and do everything ourselves. And I had a really enlightening and fun conversation with a British guy who came and worked for an industry in Sweden. He said, these Swedes, they drive me crazy because they're a jack of all trades, master of none. Because you would never want to show that I can't do something. everybody becomes quite apt at many things. You don't call a carpenter because that's not needed. But how can you not, paint a wall or whatever? In a way that Americans would just never even think that I can paint my wall. Why should you? There are people that are good at that, and you get it over with. So we have 2 dogs.
Yeah, sounds like your dog has something to say about all this.
He's probably who's asking to be let in.
Yeah, I understand. My cats would do the same thing, except I guess they wouldn't bark. But continue.
But it was many, many sleepless nights. It was very difficult, and Sweden was not ready for a service company. And this is purely service. So when we said, we have a huge housing shortage, and that's the only reason this was possible to get off the ground at all. So we've had a housing shortage in Stockholm since 1905. And yes, that's 116 years ago.
Wow.
And it's not getting better. And that was such an incredible headache that even companies who would hated to hand something over and paying somebody else to do it, because of course their own staff is free of charge. So they didn't see the opportunity cost with burdening people by doing these things themselves. So, but the housing just couldn't be done by a foreigner that came here. And I had definitely had that problem when I moved back. I moved 6 times in 18 months because it was just the way you had to do it. And I didn't have a kind company to support me. So that was how it got started. So it was a big focus. And then sort of the other services came along as, time went by. And the Americans pushed. And the Americans and the Brits, they knew from their home countries that when somebody moves, you take care of them. So they would demand a relocation company. So it was really a pull or a push service where the Swedes had to step up to the plate and understand it's done differently. This is professional. And one of my early contacts, and the older HR, they knew that this was such a time saver for them. And they invited me, and I was quite young, and they knew so much more than I did, but they would invite me to their forums. And then, since I did this on a practical, everyday basis, I would have something to bring to the table. And they were not, they were smart people, so they knew that this is a lifesaver for us. It is a great service. It's a great service anywhere in the world. And if you move with a company, this is something that makes life a lot easier. So, and they did a survey on one of the Swedish multinationals and they had daughter companies all over the world, and probably, I think it's over 50 countries. And they did a survey saying to all their daughter companies, which would typically be young guys that they sent, to all continents, all 4 corners of the world, how much of your time was spent handling practical? They had 3-year assignments. How much time did you spend the first year on practical things, the second year and the third year? And the first year, 60% of their time in some countries was spent just getting a bank account. Or, in some of these countries, it was actually very dangerous. And they needed security training for sheer survival. The second year, they worked on about a 40% capacity. And the last year, that's when, they came up to be productive people. And that was the last year before they were sent somewhere else. And when they saw the results, they realized this is a complete waste of human capital. It's a waste of resources. We need to get them relocation help so they can get up and running. And that's the whole purpose. Get up, hit the ground running, do your job. Don't spend 6 hours a day trying to get a phone company to hook up. At that time, it was just a phone. It was barely internet. It was still dial-up. But, and that's kind of how it started, which was great. But it was not easy, and it took years. So definitely couldn't afford to go to the movies. And I had extra jobs on the side for probably 2 or 3 years.
So during that time, what did you have to do? What were some of the extra jobs?
I did market research. I did questionnaires. I sold on the phone. I was like a phone salesperson for towels.
Nice. Hey,
I
we all
know.
need towels.
Yeah, I was pretty good at that actually. And it was probably bonus based. So and I just did what I had to, and I didn't spend any money. And I was so passionate about what I was doing, and it was so much fun. But it was also, I was really nervous, and it took years. And in 95, we had, in Sweden, we already had major issues. We had had a huge financial crisis. It was a bubble that burst. It was only in Sweden, so it wasn't like today. Not every country was in trouble, but Sweden was. We had 500% marginal rent interest rates. People had to leave their homes. The unemployment was massive. It was really quite depressing, and it took a few years. And to start a company in a recession, a deep recession, is not such a bad thing, because you learn to work with what you have and not waste any money, not waste time, be very, very efficient with what you do, and not have high expectations. So that was good. And then I think the first crisis was the dot-com crisis, which was in 2002. And at that time point, we had gotten pretty established. I had some employees, I had an office, and I knew and we had no money. I mean, we lived maybe, but almost month to month still. And I didn't have a salary for a year. I took out a mortgage on my apartment and told the bank that I was redoing the kitchen, which I didn't. And that was the money that I put into the company and myself for that year. And I learned a really, really important lesson. And that was put your own mask on first, because I paid my employees because I wanted to be a great employer, and I was, but I wasn't very good to myself. So it was hard for me. And it took many years to recover from that, not having a salary. And the second thing I knew was to be prepared for the worst and to have a company on really solid footing. And there have been several recessions since then. I think it's 2008. The subprime loans definitely hit Sweden. Many people lost their jobs because of that. And then the crisis that we're having now, I think we might have had another one between, have we? Maybe not. I guess the pandemic. And we have been extremely well prepared. So in 2008, we were in a situation where we didn't have to have a single assignment for a year, and we could still pay all of our bills. So we decided to spend that year by developing things, really learning, putting together template, marketing, etc. We did a quality seal, or all sorts of things that you just don't have time for when the wheels turn very quickly, which they had done. And without even noticing it, we grew by 35% in the financial crisis, which was very tough on everybody else. And ever since, we've had very solid finances as the foundation of the company. And that was the learning lesson from 2002.
Wow. So, what was the turning point then from you being able to throw in the towel on selling towels, so to speak, and just go off completely on your own and focus on your entrepreneurial endeavors? When did that happen? What was the turning point?
I'd say it took 3 or 4 years to learn certain things, like relocation is very seasonal. And it was at that time. The companies who would bring in people would be typical, like Philips, Procter and Gamble, Unilever, American Express, those kinds of companies. And their recruitment year would be very, very similar to a school year. And people would, and they brought lots of families. It's a great country to live with families. And they would recruit during spring, and then they would all go on vacation, and the new family and the new talent would move in the summer, which meant that we had probably 70% of our business over the course of 12 weeks in the summer. And it's not easy to recruit people who are really good, hard workers, smart, that want to work. The only 12 weeks, we have, a slim chance of seeing the sun. So, and also the labor law is very clear that in Sweden, you have to allow 4 weeks of vacation during the months of June, July, and August, which is peak season. So it was really, really tough. And I obviously didn't have time off and worked extremely hard. So it took, but when I understood that seasonality and changed, I instead started loving winter, started skiing a lot more, because I knew that that was the time of year when I would be able to have some time off.
Well, first of all, I wish this country had a mandatory 4 weeks of vacation in the summer. That would be amazing. And it looks like you have a visitor behind you. And secondly,
Det kommer på YouTube.
Oh, YouTube!
yes. Oh wow, this episode's been full of surprises. I love it. So
The funny thing is, I work from home, but during the week, and then I'm, rarely get visitors. But there are a few more people coming.
So is that your daughter I just met?
That was my daughter. She will turn 14 in a month.
I love it. So good thing that I actually held on to my thought for the next thing I wanted to ask you, which kind of relates to what you were talking about, which is with all the things that you've said about Sweden, and unfortunately I haven't been there yet. It's on my list. I really, really want to go there someday. Again, if nothing else, to see the ABBA museum. Again, I'm a huge fan.
It is so much fun. You have to
you
come
been
and
there?
do that. Yes. I took my whole team once, and we all dressed up, and we went there, and it was karaoke, and it's really well put together. It's a ton of fun. So I really can recommend it. And he's starting a pop house. I just heard about this on the radio this morning. And I'm not exactly, it's an arena and it's going to be a lot of live concerts. So that will be fun. And everything they do with such passion and care and love for music. So I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan since I was like 3 or 4 years old. Parents used to listen to an 8-track in our Trans Am all the time. And I just became really fascinated with them and their music, and the fact that I know more than just like Dancing Queen probably makes you happy. I mean, I'm a huge fan, and I probably should make a podcast about them. But
have you seen the Mamma Mia movies?
Mamma Mia, I've seen like pretty much everything. Like I'm a huge fan. So
there is a band in the UK when I lived there and studied that is called Bjorn Again.
Yep, I've seen.
Have you seen them?
Yep. Like I said, I'm a very big fan. Yeah. So I could go on and on about this, but
me too.
Fantastic. Well, getting back to the question is you talked about the laws with vacation and what winters are like, and there are some other things you talked about early on. how do you like sell Sweden to people that are, looking to move, and how do you sell it to be like, this is a great place to be? How do you do that?
There's so many good things about Sweden. I think one of the amazing things is it's the fifth largest country in Europe, and if you turn its tip, you actually reach Northern Africa. So we have a huge amount of space and many climate zones all the way up. You have nature, you have a lot of space, you have a lot of waters, we have 10,000 lakes. And what brings people here, if you think of it, the Netherlands and Belgium, it's very, very tightly populated, lots of people in a small space, and they just love coming up here and go to a cottage in the woods and they're happy. But we have this all so close. And Stockholm is the capital in Sweden, and this is where everything comes. And it's obviously not like a big city in the US, because there are only 10.5 million people in Sweden. And actually, I think it's only 10 or 15 years that we have grown by an additional 25%. Most people who had moved from other countries. So we've had fast growth in the population. But with this is still a city that you can walk everywhere if you like walking. Obviously, you can bike. It's easy to get around. It's fairly safe. You have 4 very clear seasons. It's a friendly place. It used to be safer than it is. It's a friendly place. And when you work here, we have very flat structures. There is no need to know basis. Everybody gets the same information. It's very open. It's very transparent. And we have a very innovative climate. And that is because, or one of the reasons would probably be, we have a strong welfare state. So when I started my company, I got a little subsidies. It was $5,000 approximately. And that was the starting capital, which is also what you needed to have a limited company. And anybody can actually get that, which is great. And that, if you are careful with your money, you can actually live on that for quite some time, especially if you're young and don't have a family. And you can't fall through completely. You will, even if you fail utterly, you will not end up under a bridge. There is a safety net, a social safety net, and you can always start over. So that there's a sense of security there. So because of this, we have a lot of startups, and we have very good universities where ideas are startup. So we work with many, many startup companies. And people want to come here and be part of that. So Spotify was founded down the street. We have, and that's just one example of many, but it's probably one of the most well-known one, because it's a consumer company. And there's a really vibrant tech scene. And what you have here that you don't necessarily have in Anglo-Saxon or German companies, you have direct access to management. Even if you're a young person, you're on a first name basis, you will be invited to meetings, also with senior management. So it's a very flat structure. And if you are a go-getter and well-educated and you want to be part of a passionate movement, there are plenty of opportunities. If you want to work hard and develop as a person, you can do that, but you can also have a family and actually see them. And you don't spend a great deal of time commuting. So when we have people moving from Sao Paulo, when you have to take helicopters from rooftops to get anywhere because traffic is so extremely heavy and you spend 4 hours a day in a car, that is just not the way it works here. Everybody also will take the bus, and that goes from managing director of huge companies to 5-year-old children that go to daycare.
Wow. Well, that sounds great to me. I think you got me sold. But unfortunately,
It's a good place to live.
unfortunately, I think my roots are pretty firmly entrenched here. But hey, you never know. So one thing that I want to ask you started talking a lot about other entrepreneurs, and you've been doing it for such a long time. Do you ever talk to other up and coming entrepreneurs? Do you have any advice for anybody trying to become an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. I do help a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I really love doing that. I think there are a few things. I have a very conservative view on business and running a business, and I'm sure there are better and smarter ways of doing a lot of things. But to me, if somebody wants to pay for what you're doing, you have a business. If you have to give away a lot and invest in getting clients, then you don't have a, the day you say to your clients, well, now we want to charge you, they will not be interested. So, and that's why I think we see a lot of apps, for instance. There's so many new apps that come out that have fantastic, phenomenal things. But I do hear all the time, especially from young people, I think I have an example. I think it was a calendar. It was called Sunshine or something along that. Do you remember? It's probably 15 years ago or something, 10 maybe. It was a great calendar. People loved it. And when they started charging, they didn't have any customers left. So they hadn't done their entire research. Is this something people would like to pay for? But that is a different economy. But if you're in the service sector, you will need to have a service. You can start a company and get people to sign up if you deliver bread to them in the morning and if you take their dog out. Everybody will think it's a great service, but are you willing to pay? You have to find your price point. And you also have to learn pretty quickly. Sweden is very, very high taxes. And I thought, like so many other entrepreneurs, I completely underestimated how much money actually doesn't come to me. I work and I get $100, let's say, I get to keep maybe 23.
Wow.
And that is just ridiculous, which means you can't imagine that that's the way it is, but it is. So you have to be pretty smart about finances and also focus on your thing, focus on what you are good at. Don't take any risks with compliance. If you are not an accountant, don't do accountancy. Pay for that, outsource things that you can't do, but make sure to get paid for what you're doing. And if no one wants to pay you, find a different business idea.
That makes sense to me because I'm absolutely horrible at math. You do not want me as your accountant, and I don't even know if you want me as your cashier. Thankful for computers because they do it all for you now. But no, I know exactly what you mean. And if I didn't think that I could do this pretty well, I might not be doing it. But I think that's what really kind of inspired me to go ahead and create a podcast and to start creating content is that I got good feedback. It feels natural. It's like this is something that I think maybe I can do. So sometimes just knowing yourself is half the battle.
I think so too. Being an entrepreneur, it's not an easy life, but you always learn something new. And for any entrepreneur, you will have some majorly rough patches. There will be many, many times when you question, especially I would say in the first 5 years. And I think 80% of businesses go out of business in 5 years. So I'm not surprised that those were the hardest years. But when you really feel that can I really do this? Does this make sense? It's hard, and it also takes longer than you would expect. So you have to really be agile, you have to be focused, but you also have to be smart about what you're doing. And I think I was just fortunate that the EU opened up. There was a lot more movement. There were all these rotational programs. That was pure luck. So I was fortunate. But if that hadn't been the case, I would have had to find something else to do that somebody would benefit somebody else enough for them to be willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that I like about doing this show that I love pointing out is that for some people, they've had to work really hard, they've had to find their passion. Then there's other people that have a story more like yours where everything just kind of fell into place at the right time. And here you are 26 years later. And there's all kinds of entrepreneurs. I mean, I did an episode a few days ago of somebody who's not actually an entrepreneur, but is like pretty much the director right below those who created the company. And he is basically doing everything except he's not the actual person who created the company. So there are all types of entrepreneurs. It's not just one direct thing. It's not just Bill Gates type of people who have, ridiculous amounts of money. And it's like, how did they get there? So it's all types of people that are entrepreneurs. And that's one of the big motivations for why I do this show. And it's not only opening up my eyes, I hope it opens up other people's eyes and makes them think of the possibilities for themselves. And that's what it's all about for me.
I think you're really spot on, and you have to do something that you really enjoy, things that come easy to you. I wouldn't start a company to challenge myself on whatever I'm doing and selling. So I wouldn't start a tech company because that wouldn't be a very good idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
No. But so I think that you have to, a life lesson is swim downstream. Don't fight things that you can't change. Don't get obsessed with doing things that is never going to work out anyway, to make a point or to be right. Or it's much better to do things that you actually enjoy, because we probably only live once. And if that's the one shot we get, why not try to enjoy it as best we can? And being an entrepreneur, it's a ton of worry. I have definitely had moments when I'm thinking, I'm just going to throw away my office key and never go back, or sell the company or close it, or, desperate thoughts. It can be totally overwhelming. And one thing that I think is true for entrepreneurs, you have to stay healthy, you have to stay fit, you have to be in balance as a person. And if you're not, it will affect your company, it will affect your employees, it will affect your clients. So you have to really be the best you at all times. And it's not just for you as a person, it's for everybody around you. Because when it doesn't, you actually put other people's livelihoods on the line if you're not, on top and positive about things.
Well, I think everything you just said there is really valuable, and I hope that brings value to others. I think it's terrific advice from somebody who has pretty much seen and done, I won't say all, but a good percentage of all during their career. And that is segueing me to how can people find you, work with you, and follow you on social media?
Nimmersion is on all social media. We're on Twitter. We are on Facebook. That's mainly for expats. and it's called Nimmersion, so it's easy to find. And we are on LinkedIn, and I am on LinkedIn. So feel free to link with me. We're pretty active on LinkedIn. We foster and cultivate connections and friends and thoughts and inspiration there. So, and we have gotten to know a lot of people, especially in this pandemic year. So it's my name. It's Lena, Lena, and Rekdal, Rekdal, and even Swedes. Only Norwegians can say that name, actually. Not even
Yeah, I
Swedes
love
say it right.
I say it like if you've ever seen Inglourious Basterds and you remember Brad Pitt's character trying to talk Italian, but he's just this guy. I feel like I said your name just like that, like Red Cow,
Yeah. I'm so used to it. And my name is Lena, and everybody calls me Lena. And I have just come to terms with that, aged so many years ago. So it doesn't matter at all. As long as somebody looks at me, they're probably talking to me. So that's fine. But I would say LinkedIn is the best place to find me. And we also have a contact form on Nimmersion.com website. So that's another way of doing it.
Excellent. Well, I feel like we've come up to the end of our time here. I'm sure we could talk more ABBA and lots of other things here, but we are out of time. Lena, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. It was quite a journey, with all the interruptions, and I'm even getting interrupted by my cat right now. She's climbing up
She's
all over.
quiet.
Yeah, no, well, I've always wondered. I've never been able to pick up her meowing during an episode. She does meow a lot from time to time, but I've never actually heard her. So I guess I'm directing the mic in a good direction that you're not hearing her. But I digress. Lena Rekdal, immigration and relocation expert, founder of global mobility firm Nimmersion, established in 1995. Thank you so much for being on Mark My Words. It was really educational. I think you brought a lot of value, and it was great to chat about global mobility. I learned so much from it, and I hope other people learn not only about more about global mobility, but learn about being an entrepreneur. I thought you brought some great insight and advice, and thank you for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was great. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, that is all we have time for today. I am Mark Schmidt. I'll be back soon with a new episode of Mark My Words. Thank you for tuning in.